Project for today is this Yard Machines riding mower. It's got the Tecumseh Enduro in it. These were not known to be the best engines, and 12.5 horse. But the carburetor's gummed up on it. It'll run. I put some gas down in the air cleaner hole here, but other than that, it won't run. And he was having trouble with the blades. When he would turn the blades on, it would kill the motor. But I'm thinking he had the seat switch had fallen off here, and I just unplugged it. So I'm thinking that was his problem. So we'll go through the carburetor and see if we can get it running so we can test it, and then go from there. So these Tecumsehs have just like a little metal wire that goes around here that you can pull off and pop the float bowl off, and then that's just plastic. So I think I'm going to try to take that off first, just to see if it's just something plugged in the bottom, because he said this didn't sit for too long, but it did sit outside for a while, so I'm wondering if he got some water in the carburetor. So I just clamped off the fuel line so we don't leak too bad. And we'll just put a screwdriver in here, pry this back. Yeah, looks like it's a little bit rusty in there. And there's O-rings on this tube here, so you want to make sure those aren't all gummed up. They'll sometimes get gummy, and then you can see it a little bit better. They'll get a little bit gummy, and then they'll end up plugging the hole. But this one, I don't know if I can get it so you can kind of see that. You can see light through it, and then through the sides it's got holes in it too, you can see through. So that part doesn't look too bad. We'll get that float bowl over on the bench and see what we're dealing with there. So we'll dump the fuel out of here. And there's a spring that sits down in the middle that just dumped out there. So that's one thing not to lose. And kind of look, you can kind of tell that that's pretty much just all water. So that's probably the biggest issue. When you put it on your finger, you can kind of tell it doesn't feel like gas. It doesn't even hardly smell like gas. It's just pretty much pure water. And I'll clean this up a little bit, and then probably drain some out of the tank also. We'll see if that has water right in the gas tank. You can kind of see it's starting to separate now. That water down in the corner is the darker part. So I'll have to drain this whole tank and then put some fresh gas in it once we get the carburetor put back together. So I just rinsed this off so I didn't have a bunch of dirt on there to get inside. And then I'm gonna pull this screw out here. You can see there's some rust on that. There's a little spring inside here, and that holds a little plastic jet, and that's all kind of gummy. And it's just mainly just rust from water being in there. I need to get something smaller to pop that out of there. Oh, there it goes. that little pin just sits down in a couple notches that you got to pop it out of. That needle seat in there actually looks okay. It's mainly just the gummed up stuff down in the bottom in there. We'll hose that out, and then there's a little hole here you want to make sure is clear. And then we'll clean everything else up, start putting it back together. So this is what I was talking about with these O-rings. As you can see that this one was actually swollen, so it was completely closing off the passage. So this should have been just a regular round O-ring with a big hole in the middle that's sealed on top of this jet. And you can see what it just covers pretty much the whole thing. I poked that hole through there when I was trying to clean it out, and I realized there was the O-ring in there. So we'll have to replace that. And then that was down through this hole. And you can actually kind of see it. There's a little passage down in there that you can see where it goes in that way, and then it comes up through the center where this piece sits like that. So I'll grab an O-ring for that, and then we'll spray it out a couple more times and start putting it back together. So I got that back in there. You can kind of see how this pushes on that spring on the jet and then holds it all in place, and then the O-ring underneath there seals the jet to the passageway. Then we'll put our float back in. And just push down on that pin across those two little clips. And we had our spring in here, and then that. So when you put it back together, you just got to make sure that doesn't get cocked off to the side. You want to make sure it goes down in there when you're pushing it back up into the carb. But other than that, we should be good to put it back together, and then we'll get some fresh gas in that tank. I've had that draining while I was doing this. And put this float bowl back up here. There's a couple of locating pins on the float bowl to make it go up square. And snap that back on. Now if this thing had been sitting for a really long time, I would have just pulled the entire thing off and do a thorough cleaning, but I kind of had a hunch that it was just water in it from sitting. But then that O-ring was also bad, so it's a good thing we took that apart. So I am gonna take a couple rags and go down in here and try to wipe this tank out and make sure we get all the moisture out of there before we put fuel in it. So if you watch the John Deere L130 video that I did, I showed the same thing, but I just got one of these kind of flexible grabbers with the little things on the end of it. And then I take a rag and I just clamp it in there, and then we'll stuff that down in the fuel tank. Just spread it, push it around, and let it soak up all the moisture in there. Other than pulling the tank off, it's about the best way I've found to dry them out. Then once you do this, if it was really bad where it had a ton of water in it, you can take an air hose or a fan or something and blow some air in there for a while until it's completely dry. I'll put a link to that John Deere lawnmower video up in the corner there in case you wanted to check that one out too. That one we went through quite a bit more stuff than what I'm doing on this one. This one's just kind of a quick one. The guy didn't want to spend a whole lot of money on it, being it's a older, cheaper mower. But these were actually pretty tough mowers for back in the day. They were these yard machines were kind of just the budget machines, but they were better if you could get them with the Briggs & Stratton engine in them, for sure. That Tecumseh was okay, but they didn't have the longevity of the Briggs & Strattons and some of the other ones. The Kohler, the Command series and stuff, that was a really good one too, but then you're talking a higher price point. So then what we'll do is I'll put a little bit of fresh gas in it and I'll let it drain out this line, just to flush the line out too. Because there's nothing worse than doing all this and then having a bunch of water get in again because it was like in this fuel filter or something, so I always try to flush the line out. I'm going to install a fuel shutoff in line here too. Really everything should have one of these fuel shutoffs. If you have something happen where your carburetor starts leaking or overflowing or something and you have like a hot muffler, it's pretty unsafe to not be able to just quick shut the fuel off, and if that lit on fire or something, it would pretty much be nothing you could do but watch it burn. So I always try to put a fuel shutoff on these when they don't have one. I'll just cut the line there. These do have a direction of flow arrow on them. You can't really see it very good, but I'll go grab another clamp for that. Now we can put some fuel in it and we'll drain a little bit into that pan, see if we get any more water out of it. You can see that there's a little bit of moisture that came out, but really nothing to worry about. But it's still good to flush that line out like that. And we'll hook that back up to the carburetor. I'll throw the air cleaner back on it. Probably put a new air filter on it. That one looked like it had gotten wet too. A lot of those paper air filters, once they get wet, they're pretty much junk. They dry out and they seems like they close up a little bit where they don't suck air through them very good after they dry. Kind of like when you get a piece of paper wet and then it's never really the same again. I didn't have a new air filter for it. I just went and looked, but you can see by the rust on top that this one had gotten wet. But we'll try it out with it and see. I'll probably order a filter for them. But we'll turn the gas on here. Let the carb fill up and check the oil quick. Which, that looks like it's a little bit over full, but we'll give it a try. I'll get some stuff cleaned up and we'll take it out back and give it a try. I think the blades were not great, but he said he had some blades for it, I think. Oh, actually, they don't look too bad. Look like it's a little bit bent, but it's good enough. We can go give it a try and see how it runs. All right, I got her out back where the grass is pretty long, so it'll be a good test for it. And I'm gonna fire it up and see how it mows. that's gonna do it for this one. This one wasn't too difficult of a project, but we got it going and it mowed pretty decent. This grass was really long, so it was kind of tough. I had to go over it twice a lot of the time, but the blades didn't work too bad. But if you like this sort of thing, like the videos and subscribe to the channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.